Why would you want to be strong when you could be better than strong? Let's talk about 5th edition's strength problem. Today we're going to be talking about strength versus dexterity. I'm going to do a rundown of all their applicable stats and what they modify and what we use them for and everything. So strength applies to two-handers, which the greatsword and I think the maul do 2d6, and then there's obviously the great axe that does 1d12, and then there's one-handers in the strength realm that do 1d8 and 1d6. Dexterity handles ranged weapons like bows and crossbows and such. They also have a 1d8 one-hander in rapiers, and then they have short swords and such for 1d6. Both have saving throws, so we'll just put them in there together. There are strength-based skills like athletics for jumping and climbing and stuff like that, and then there's dex-based skills like acrobatics, and there's stealth and lockpicking, thief stuff, mostly stuff like that. And then there's the things that really stand apart for each of them. Strength affects your carrying capacity, and dexterity increases your armor class, and I forgot to write it down, but it also affects your initiative. So if you go down the list and you really have to pick a winner between the two, I'm going to give the weapons that apply to each category to dexterity, because ranged weapons are huge, especially in 5th edition. It's a really big benefit to be able to do your damage while staying apart, and I'll talk a little bit later about why it's such a big thing that dexterity adds damage to your ranged weapons. When it comes to saving throws, I don't think it's even close. I could go 5 or 6 sessions without anybody ever having to do a strength saving throw, but dexterity saving throws come up all the time. Fireballs and most traps and stuff are dexterity saving throws. When you look at the skills, it's kind of a tie, because I think athletics is one of the most commonly used skills in the whole game, but then dex also has ones that you use all the time. Specifically, I think it's called stealth now. It used to be hide and move silently, but anytime you're trying not to be seen or trying to pick a lock, you're using dex-based skills. So I called that one a tie. As for this last part, the armor class and initiative, I had to put 2 checks on it. I'll only give it 1 win, but it's crazy how much more useful armor class and initiative is than carrying capacity, and I don't know, I guess you could put grapple over on the strength side. So when you break it down, you've got strength coming in at 0, 3, and 1, and dexterity coming in at 3 wins, 0 losses, and 1 tie. If you were doing hockey scoring, dexterity would get 7 points towards making the playoffs, and strength would get 1. So I guess dexterity is 7 times as good as strength. So you have to look at ways to make up that gap for strength, and one of the most common ways that I hear people talk about is to add an encumbrance rule, but the problem with that is it ends up just being boring work. It's a lot of keeping track of stuff that nobody cares about, how much weight everybody's carrying, where they're holding it, when they put it down, when they pick it back up. It's just stuff that most people don't even want to do. And if you're adding something that no one wants to do into the game, it's not a good system. So the real answer is to reward strength. Put things into the game that reward players for being the strong character. A perfect example is if you put treasure somewhere and then in front of it there's just something in the way that's really heavy, and you have to have a certain strength score or roll a certain strength check to move it out of the way. Then the whole party gets treasure and your person gets to be a hero, and that's what this whole game is all about. It's making a character who gets to be a hero. I think a good character example, and I know I come back to this a lot, is if you look at Lord of the Rings and you compare their strength character, Gimli, to their dexterity character, Legolas. Legolas ends up doing everything that Gimli can do and more. He shines in pretty much every one of the movies, and it almost becomes like a joke that Legolas is doing everything that Gimli is doing, but he's also doing more things. And I think that's how 5th edition has portrayed strength and dexterity. The situation balanced itself out in 3.5 edition because weapon damage for strength, you would be attacking with a melee weapon, and the damage was modified by the strength mod. So the stronger you were, the more damage your weapon did. So your bonus for being a strength-based character was that you were doing a lot of damage. Then dexterity already has the inherent benefit that we already talked about. It does other things and also applies to ranged weapons, but in the older editions, it didn't add damage to your ranged weapons, so you were sacrificing damage to gain those benefits. But now that dexterity is doing all the damage as well, you're not sacrificing anything, so there's an imbalance that's created by that. An important thing to note is that A big part of this being a problem is that elves are dumb sissies, and any real hero is someone who just runs up like a psychopath and chops people to bits.